housing becomes unaffordable, there are some obvious consequences. People that might buy remain renters, squeezing the rental market and making it even more expensive. And smaller markets get pricier as buyers seek out better deals. But households themselves change shape. According to StatsCan, the number of households in Canada made up of roommates is 4% of the total, but it's also the fastest growing category. And multiple family homes is also up at 7% of the total. It's grown 45% since 2001. And that points to a consequence of unaffordability that may be lasting. Households that aren't formed at all, or concealed households. Mike Moffatt is Senior Director of the Smart Prosperity Institute and an Assistant Prof at the Ivey Business School at Western University. Mike, great to have you with us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So this is a really interesting notion of people that seek out alternative arrangements because they can't afford to start their own household. Can that set people back, do you think, when we think of it kind of the longer-term economic or policy consequences? Does it set them back for a long time?
Yeah, it absolutely does. That we see here in Ontario, families getting formed later. We see families having their first child later and having fewer kids than they otherwise would have. And that's simply due to a lack of housing, that you've got more 20-somethings continuing to live with their parents or continuing to live with roommates or in small condos and aren't really comfortable, having kids and starting families in those kinds of environments. So absolutely, this housing shortage and this affordability issue is causing all of these social effects, and a big one is the formation of new families.
And it's interesting, of course, because one of the groups that remains pretty large, it's been steady for a couple of decades, are children who still live with their parents, which might pull you into kind of a multi-generational kind of a family living. Will that actually point us in the wrong direction in terms of the size and type of homes we build? Will we build monster homes because there are 3 generations living in them instead of affordable single-family homes?
Yeah, and we're already seeing that, particularly in the Peel and York regions in Ontario, that the number of multi-generational households is going up and has been going up for a while. And some of that is due to cultural reasons, but part of it is economic. And if we look across Canada, the 5 communities with the highest proportion of people living in their 20s are all in Ontario, and Windsor, for instance, is one of those. And that's not, again, entirely due to cultural reasons, that there are big affordability issues causing young people to continue to live with their parents well into their 30s in many cases.
And, hopefully if you're living with your parents, you have a little bit more stability in terms of not being kicked out. I worried when I looked at some of this data about concealed households that are quite vulnerable. You can be vulnerable if you're living with a roommate, if you're living in somebody else's property. Do we need to concern ourselves with kind of access to basic shelter when we look at some of these numbers?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a big issue that we're seeing people continue to live in abusive situations because they have nowhere to go to. We're seeing international students often live 15 or 20 people to a single home, 2 to 4 people in a single bedroom. Because of a lack of housing. So I'm from London, Ontario, and there was a house fire back in February, a tragic house fire. Luckily, everyone survived, but they discovered that there were 15 students all living in a fairly small bungalow. So yeah, these are absolutely, this under-housing issue is absolutely a problem, and it's causing people to live in unsafe situations in many cases.
And of course, we don't have a ton of time, Mike, but we see rates going up. We think that'll cool the market. Will that solve the affordability problem? Are you optimistic that we're getting to a place where it'll be more affordable, or is that just a longer-term question and more supply is the answer?
Well, we certainly need more supply, and I think right now, with higher interest rates, we're solving one problem by causing another. So we do see house prices go down. In some cases, they're down 20 to 30% in some markets. So that's great if you're saving up the money for a down payment, but you have to pay those higher interest costs so over time. So any savings that you make on the down payment are generally eaten up by the higher interest costs. So at the end of the day, first-time home buyers really aren't saving that much.
Mike, it's great to have you with us. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me.
Mike Moffatt is Senior Director of Smart Prosperity and an Assistant Prof at the Ivey Business School at the University of Western Ontario. Time for the takeaway and rethinking how we think about housing. For many years, many of us have been coached to think of our home as an investment, and that the ideal picture of that home is a single-family detached dwelling. The mortgage we take out will pay off because over time we also buy a larger share of the house, hopefully owning all of it one day, so that at the end of our lives, which is also when most of us will have paid that mortgage off, we have a nice little nest egg. But what if this picture is flawed? What if we were coached into thinking this way because it enriches a whole group of businesses, from the banks that make a nice profit on an asset-backed loan, to the agents who buy and sell, to the myriad businesses that benefit from all the investment we make into that house? And what if there was a nice available rental stock and we were less conditioned to think of renting as some sort of failure? And if the money we saved every month from renting instead of paying interest on debt was saved, would we in fact be better off after 25 or 30 years? That's a plausible scenario, and the only real problem right now is the issue of what we can rent. Since we've all bought into the story that our homes have to look a certain way, that's what's been built. We could change that, though, change the script and ask for comfortable, home-like, spacious rental options in nice neighborhoods. Cities like New York and London have these, and there is no shame in being a renter there. Since Canada has a housing problem and new homes have to be built, why not build efficient, sustainable apartment units rather than more sprawling, energy-sucking single-family homes? My takeaway, there's nothing magic about that picket fence in front of the house, and for too many Canadians, it's become more like a prison than a promise. That's Taking Stock for this week. I'm Amanda Lang. Thanks for being with us.